Welcome to my channel, Mixed Media Creations, with me, Creative Katie, Karen Birchall. If you're not already a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button. If you are, please tell your friends about my channel. Help spread the good news. Today we have an art journal tutorial. You can support my channel by donating through the PayPal link or by shopping through my Amazon influencer links. Any support you can give me is much appreciated. Today's page is called Start Each Day with a Grateful Heart. And in it, I'm going to follow a 5-step art journal process. This is great for beginners. So I've been going through a bit of a slump in my art. I've been really busy getting ready for craft fairs and Christmas markets and hanging my art in coffee shops, and all that work has just kind of left me exhausted and in a slump. So today I'm going to work in my mixed media Canson, and this is 7 by 10, and I love this size, and it's great for beginners because it's not too big and it's not too small. So I put a coat of gesso on here, and I typically start all my projects with gesso. It just helps prepare the page, but you remember you don't need to get the expensive brand name gesso. So what I'm going to start with in the first step here is collage, and I've just grabbed some colors. I've been doing a lot of blues and teals, and so I'm going to go into the pinks and purpley area. I grabbed some music sheet that was handy. As I said, I've been in a slump, and I really have absolutely no idea where this page is going to take me. But I'm determined to break through the slump, and the best way I know how to do that is just by, to some degree, forcing the issue and just getting in here. So it's more about breaking through and just enjoying my supplies. I've taped off the edge, and that keeps the coil from getting all the gunk in it, and it gives me a nice straight edge at the end. I'm using gel medium to adhere down these music pages, and I really like using the music pages. Sometimes you'll see this at the end. Sometimes it adds texture, and sometimes because it's so aged, it adds that golden color to it. And I just opened up my file folder full of gel prints and papers that I used up leftover paint on, and I'm just ripping those and adhering them down. Now, when I use collage at the beginning of a project like this, it may help me get to the next step. It may give me colors, it may give me patterns, it may give me some ideas of something that I can build on, but it could also all end up not being really seen. And I'm okay with that because it is adding some lovely texture. Layering these papers one on top of the other, adding this doily on here will give me texture that may not show up so much on the camera, but in the finished project it really does. So I'm just putting gel medium underneath and on top. I prefer gel medium, but you can use Mod Podge. And I also like, when I'm using collage here, papers of different thicknesses. And I just find that adds interest. You can use scrapbook papers here. You can use magazine papers. If you're in the process of building up your stash of colored papers, you can use all of those things. So what do you do if you're in a slump? How do you get yourself out of that creative slump? Leave your ideas down below. So the next step here is going to be to do some stamping. And stamping is going to add some pattern and some interest. And what I'm using here are a collection of stamps, and you can see them on the right, that I created in my last Build Your Stash video, and I'll put a link to that video. You may want to check that out because it's a great way of building up your stamps very inexpensively. And I know when you're starting out, you don't have a whole lot of money. You can't have everything. And in fact, I'm actually leaning towards using more and more of my homemade stamps. They really add something different that you're not going to see on everybody's page. I love that kind of star stamp, and I think I'm going to be making that smaller so that it fits on like a pill bottle stamp. This is my darkroom door script stamp, and I just want some of this on here. Now again, at these beginning layers, some of this will not show. And I know when I started, had a hard time understanding, well, why would you do it? It all adds to it. Just maybe a little bit's going to show. And I'm using archival ink. And archival ink is permanent, so no matter what I put on there, it's going to stay the same. So now the next step is stenciling. And I am going to use texture paste through a stencil. Now I grabbed this, I believe it's called Believe. It's a Balzer, the Crafter's Workshop stencil. And I was going to use it because, of course, it's brand new and I have to use it. And then I got distracted by another Balzer stencil, which I just relocated. It had fallen behind my cabinet. This mini chevron. So I'm using the Light and Fluffy modeling paste from the Crafter's Workshop, and I'm just putting it through that stencil. And I'm not too worried about getting this very precise. I just want to add some texture to my page. And sometimes I find when you add this and it's white on top of the color, that spurs on creativity. Now I could have just stenciled through with acrylic paint too, and that would be acceptable in that. So I'm grabbing the pink, quinacridone magenta, the orange, Naples yellow, which I love, and deep violet. And that seems like an odd combination, especially the orange, but I love how it works in here. Now I was attempting to put this on, and then I realized that the texture paste was still a little wet, so I took some time off camera and I dried it. Then I decided I'm going to grab my palette knife and just scrape some of these colors on here. Now you get a very different effect when you scrape it on as opposed to brushing it on, opposed to using your fingers. And I encourage you to try these different ways and see which you like best. Now this, when you're scraping it on, you got to remember this isn't the finished product. It took me a long time to get comfortable with using it. But by the combination of using the palette knife now and then using my fingers later, it gives an interesting effect. Some of this, when I put it on with the palette knife, is a little more opaque. It covers a little bit more. And it catches in the texture in a different way. I love how the purple, the deep violet, and the yellow just pop. And you know, I've gone to different art shows and stuff, and I'm really drawn to pictures and artists that are using those colors right now. So no surprise that this showed up today, even though it wasn't necessarily where I started. And I'm just rubbing it with my fingers. And I'm grabbing a couple different colors and it's blending on the page, and that builds interest because while I might have 4 colors there, when they blend together they make more colors and shades of those and tones of those colors. And if I think I have, too much or I don't like where it is, I can just take a baby wipe and remove some of it or push it back a little bit. And I love how that Naples yellow, because it's so opaque, kind of neutralizes the brightness of the quinacridone magenta and the deep violet. I'm loving how that mini chevron from the Crafter's Workshop stencil is showing up here. Even though it's not a focal point, it does make its presence known, and I like it. I just keep playing till I like what I see. I find adding that orange on top of any of those colors it just adds, I don't know, it just makes everything pop. And so while it's not reading orange, it definitely adds to the finished thing. And orange is so not my color. So now I'm kind of thinking I might go with a sunset or something. I still really have no idea. I'm enjoying the process. I like the fact I've got some paint on my hands, and I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe I'm just going to be okay with just making a gorgeous background. Maybe I'm not even going to put a focal point on here. So I've taken this chevron stencil and I've got gold paint, and I'm just using the same stencil. Now, I know in some of my videos and in lots of people's videos, they use lots of different stencils. When you're starting out, you may want to just try using fewer and using the same stencil in different ways. So one, I put the texture paste through it. Two, I'm stenciling with it with acrylic paint. And I might use the same stencil again with a couple different colors of acrylic paint. But it's the same stencil, and that'll help build continuity and cohesiveness into your piece. So I'm looking at that, and I like the bling. That's very subtle. And then I decide, I might just stencil this on. And then I go, nope, I'm not going to stencil. I'm going to grab the stamp, and I'm going to stamp with it. So I try putting it on with the makeup sponge, and it's a little too slow, so I put it on the paper. So again, the same stamp images that I had in previous layers are now coming into other layers. Yeah, definitely going to be taking this stamp and making a smaller version of it. So I'm just using different colors, different stamps that you saw me use in step 2. So step 1 was collage, step 2 was stamping, step 3 was stenciling, and now I'm kind of adding a little bit more stamping in here. But the page is telling me what it needs. Right now I just want to add some more interest. I'm always excited when the page starts telling me what it needs. And here, then I decide I need some white. So this is a homemade stamp, and I use shelf liner, and I cut it in a circle, and I just mounted it onto a wooden block. A little too precise here. So I'm just adding more. It just lightened it that little bit. If you splatter, it would do the same. So you know what? When in doubt, I said a heart or a butterfly, and I had both of them out, and I just decided, I'm just going to grab my heart templates here, and I'm going to trace them with my Stabilo All pencil, play with a different pattern here, maybe try some different things out. So it's not terribly original, but this technique, and this is step 5, you're adding the focal point. And so my focal point is going to be the hearts. And I'm going to use the negative painting technique. Or actually, I'm just shading. I'm not going to use the negative. It's a version of the negative painting technique, I guess, where I do some shading. And where I'm just deciding which heart is going to appear to be on top of which, and then I'm erasing any lines that I don't need or want. And it's really hard. You can barely tell where those hearts have been traced, but in real life you can see it. So if you have a wonderful, colorful background and you're not sure what you can do hearts or circles or some very new, or a flower, some kind of shape that you can do that technique with. Now the thing to remember with the Stabilo oil pencil is it's not permanent. So if I'm going to add wet things later or spray this or brush it with varnish, it will reactivate. So you need to know that. That doesn't mean you shouldn't use it. It just means you will have to make different choices down the road. So I couldn't locate my black paint. You know, I spend all this time cleaning and organizing my studio, and then I still can't find things. So I've got the black paint, and I've got my angle brush, and I'm going to do the floating acrylic technique. And I'm just going on the inside of the heart. You can go on the outside of the heart. You get a slightly different effect. I've done it both ways. I do it differently every time. I'd like to be able to tell you why I choose to do it sometimes. And what this is going to do is make the shape, whatever shape you have, pop out of the background. Now, if you've tried this shading, floating acrylic technique and it's not for you, you're not happy with the results, one thing that I've noticed that it works best when you put a pressure on the brush and press down. That will give you more paint and along those lines. But if you don't want to do this, what you could do is use woodless charcoal pencil. You can use Neocolor 2 blacks, your Stabilo, watercolor pencils, and just activate them. You just have to remember that they will not be permanent. But they will all work and they will give you a similar effect. So don't think, oh, she's doing this technique, I can't do it. You absolutely can. There are more than one way to get a similar effect. Alternatively, you could have painted everything that wasn't a heart black. And that's the true negative painting, where you paint the outside, and that would have been all black and only the hearts would be colored. But I've been doing a couple of those, so I need to do something somewhat different. You know, when you're in a slump, sometimes returning to something that's very you're very familiar with, might be the way to get back your mojo. And definitely here. I mean, I've done hearts before, this circles would have been nice on here as well. Don't like what you have, just use a wet wipe and remove it as quick as you can. Because this is on acrylic, it's not going to have a problem. When I finish the float acrylic all the way around, I do take a baby wipe, and I did that off camera, and I dabbed off the Stabilo all pencil. I was going to do the floating acrylic white inside, And I never did. I decided to go a different way. And if I had left the Stabilo oil pencil on there, it would have made the white dirty looking. As it ended up, you can skip that step because it's in my art journal. I don't varnish it. I don't, it's in there. It's not intended to be framed. It's not on a canvas. So it's a little more forgiving than if you were absolutely going to be finishing those. So I'm liking the composition of the hearts and, the arrangement of the hearts. I'm trying not to be so totally symmetrical, and I wanted to use this as a way of testing out different arrangements. And I'm just touching up the shading around the hearts, just adding a little bit more where I see fit. And it is a process. I do a little bit, I let it dry, then I come back and I do a little bit more. There seems to be a space here, so I'm going to add another heart. So the first step was collage, second step stamping, third step stenciling, fourth step was adding color, fifth step was the focal point, and then after that, pre-play tells you to, finish. And so I'm adding the words, and I chose start each day with a grateful heart. An attitude of gratitude. And I just went through my stash. I have a pile of sentiments, and I just wanted to use something that I already had. And I did play off camera on where I'm going to put all these hearts. And I tried it in various ways, and this one seemed to be the best one. So I'm just going to grab the Stabilo All pencil, and I'm just going to do some shading around the edge. Again, you can use woodless charcoal pencil. I could use the float acrylic technique around the edges. I could use the ink pad. There's lots of ways of doing it. Find what works, what you have the most successful with, and that's what you do. So I'm just going to ask everybody again, if you have creative friends, if you know other people, please share my channel with them. I'm trying to keep building my channel, get more viewers and subscribers, and that just helps. The fine liner bottles and any other specialized materials that I use in the creation of this, I will put a link to through my Amazon store. Here I'm just using the fine liner bottle, and I'm kind of going around it a couple different ways. I'm going back and forth, and I'm trying to get it. It's not very precise. Now remember, there's texture. There's texture from layers of paper, and there's textures from modeling paste. And so if you try to go right against the paper, it catches and you make a mess. So I don't even attempt to do it great. I'm trying to do it sketchy. I used the Murphy's oil soap mixture, and I took off the cap and sprayed it into the cap because I had a bit of a clog in there. Then I decide I want to bring out some of the texture of the texture paste, the light and fluffy modeling paste. And I'm just adding just a little bit of black on the hearts that aren't with the words on it. And then I take gold and I put gold on top, and then I really don't like it. So then I use a baby wipe. You'll see me doing that in a minute and taking that off. Especially the gold. It didn't do what I wanted it to do. I think a lot of the black ended up staying there. And there I go. You have to try things. Art journaling is great because it's all about the process. It's about learning. Now you can take what you've learned there and make canvases or make things that are more permanent. But my art journal for me is all about the learning and exploring and discovering new things. Then I decide I'm going to take the gold and go around on top of the black with the gold fine liner. And I like that. That's kind of the look I wanted before by adding a little bit of gold in there. And again, I'm not too precise here. And I've had to learn over time to just relax a little bit and not worry if it's not perfect. This whole project took about 50 minutes, start to finish. Using the fine liner bottle to kind of go around the words. I hope you give something like this a try. Follow the 5 steps, use hearts, use the shading technique. If you do, please come back and tell me about it or join my Facebook group. Hope to see you there. There's some close-ups of the finished page. Thanks for joining me.